He slapped her tray out of her hands in a hospital hallway. In front of witnesses. In front of cameras. In front of God and everyone. She was 7 months pregnant. In her scrubs. Coming off a 12-hour night shift, and he slapped that tray so hard the sound cracked through the corridor like a thunderclap, cups scattering across the floor, her tablet spinning across the linoleum, and then he stood over her, straightened his Italian jacket, and said, "Watch where you're going." No apology. No shame. Not even the basic human instinct to check whether she was hurt. Just cold, practiced contempt. And when she looked up at this exhausted, pregnant nurse who had spent the last 12 hours bringing other people's children safely into the world, he didn't flinch. He leaned forward and reminded her, very calmly, that his name was on the building. That the floor she was standing on existed because of his check. That, whatever complaint she was thinking about filing, she should think very carefully about how that ended. For her, he said. Then Daniel Peters turned around and walked away smiling. He had no idea, not the faintest shadow of a clue, that the woman picking her medication cups up off that floor while people watched in horrified silence had a brother, and that her brother didn't own a building. He owned the city. Welcome to Kindness Arena. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and unseen connections that change lives, please help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers. Help me show her that stories like this matter and deserve to be heard by hitting the subscribe button, liking the video, comment your thoughts, where you are watching from, and share it with someone who needs it to stay motivated. Your support keeps these powerful true stories alive. Daniel Peters had never learned the word consequence. Not when he was 7 years old and broke his nanny's favorite porcelain vase and blamed it on the gardener's son. Not when he was 23 and bribed his way through a business degree at one of the most prestigious universities on the East Coast. Not when he was 31 and bought his way out of a drunk driving charge that had left another man's car crumpled against a sidewalk railing. He was 44 now, and consequence remained a foreign language, one spoken only by lesser people, by the kind of people who waited in lines, who said please and thank you, who flinched when voices were raised. Daniel Peters did not flinch. Daniel Peters was the raised voice. He stood 6'2" with the kind of posture that came not from discipline but from a lifetime of looking down at everyone around him. His suits were Italian. His watch, a platinum Patek Philippe that cost more than most people earned in 3 years. His hair was silver at the temples in a way that his personal stylist had carefully cultivated to look distinguished rather than aged. He drove a blacked-out Bentley Bentayga, had 3 homes across 2 continents, and his name was engraved on the donor wall of Hargrove Medical Center in letters large enough to read from across the lobby. That last part was important to Daniel. Perhaps the most important part of all. Because money could buy many things, cars, silence, loyalty, time, but what Daniel Peters craved above everything else was the one currency no amount of wire transfer could guarantee: respect through fear. He wanted people to step aside when he walked into a room, not because they admired him, but because they were afraid of what happened to those who didn't. And in Hargrove Medical Center, on a crisp Tuesday morning in October, Daniel Peters walked through those automatic glass doors like he owned the place. Because in his mind and in a very real financial sense he did. He had not come because he was sick. Daniel Peters would sooner die than admit illness to anyone. He had come because the hospital's chief administrator, Dr. Franklin Adam, had been pestering him for 3 weeks about the terms of the next phase of the Peters wing expansion. The second floor was nearly complete, an oncology unit that bore his name in gold-plated lettering, and the board wanted to discuss the ceremonial opening, the press coverage, the photo opportunities. Daniel had agreed to the meeting because he liked photo opportunities. He liked being photographed cutting ribbons with oversized scissors. He liked the way journalists asked him questions in reverent tones. He liked the framed newspaper clippings his assistant printed and had mounted in his office. Peters donates $4 million to Hargrove, local philanthropist funds new cancer wing. Daniel Peters, the man rebuilding this city's healthcare. Philanthropist. He savored the word the way other men savored aged whiskey. His assistant, Mark, a thin, perpetually nervous young man who walked 2 steps behind him at all times, was struggling to keep up as Daniel moved through the main corridor of the hospital's second floor with the stride of a man who had somewhere important to be and no patience for obstacles. "The meeting is in Conference Room B, Mr. Peters," Mark said, nearly jogging. Dr. Adams said 11 o'clock. "I know where the meeting is," Daniel said without turning around. "Stop narrating my life." The corridor was busy. It was a hospital, the corridors were always busy. Nurses moved between rooms with tablets and medication carts. Orderlies pushed equipment. Visitors walked in clusters, voices low with worry. The entire ecosystem of human suffering and healing moved around Daniel Peters, and he regarded none of it. He was checking his phone. That was why he didn't see her until the very last second. Nurse Paige Graham was 7 months pregnant. This was not a subtle fact. Her belly was full and round beneath her blue scrubs, a life visibly present and close to arrival. She had been a labor and delivery nurse at Hargrove for 6 years, and in those 6 years she had delivered hundreds of babies, worked doubles when the floor was short-staffed, stayed past her shift more times than she could count, and done it all with a steadiness that her colleagues described, consistently, as grace under pressure. She was 28 years old, sharp-eyed, warm-mouthed, with natural hair pinned carefully beneath her nursing cap. She had worked the night shift and was finishing her final rounds before her day shift replacement arrived. She was tired in the deep, cellular way that only pregnant women who have been on their feet for 12 hours truly understand. But she was moving with purpose. She always moved with purpose, carrying a tablet and a small medication tray as she came around the corridor corner. She didn't see Daniel Peters until she was 2 feet from him. He didn't see her until he was 1 foot away. The collision was minor, her shoulder caught his arm, not hard, barely more than a brush. The tablet bobbed in her hand, the medication tray shifted but she caught it with practiced reflexes. Nothing fell. No one was hurt. It was an accident. The kind that happened 100 times a day in busy hospital hallways. The kind where both parties say sorry and continue their separate journeys without another thought. Paige was already opening her mouth to say exactly that, "I'm so sorry, excuse me," when the tray was suddenly, violently, slapped out of her hands. The sound cracked through the hallway like a gunshot. The tray hit the floor with a metallic clang that echoed off the walls. Medication cups scattered. The tablet spun from Paige's grip and skidded across the linoleum. Every head in the corridor turned. And Daniel Peters stood over her because she had stumbled back against the wall from the force of the slap, one hand flying protectively to her stomach with his phone still in his other hand, his face a mask of cold, contemptuous fury. "Watch where you're going," he said. His voice carried the way the voices of men who had never been told no always carried, loud without effort, sharp without hesitation. As though the corridor and everyone in it existed solely to receive his words. Paige stared at him. Her hand was still pressed against her stomach. Her heart was slamming against her ribs. Not from pain, though her wrist ached where the edge of the tray had caught it on the way down, but from the sheer, disorienting shock of it, of being struck in a hospital while pregnant. By a man in a suit who looked at her like she was something he had stepped in. She started. "You almost made me drop my phone," Daniel said, as if this were the relevant detail. As if this were the summary of the situation. Around them, the corridor had gone very quiet. A young orderly named Kevin had frozen mid-step. 2 visiting family members stood with their mouths open. 3 other nurses had stopped and were staring. One of them, a senior nurse named Ruth, had her hand pressed to her mouth. Mark, Daniel's assistant, had gone the color of old paper. "Sir," Mark whispered. "Sir, I can see she's pregnant," Daniel said, with the casual cruelty of a man who understood perfectly what he had done and had decided it was, at most, a minor inconvenience to acknowledge. "That doesn't mean she gets to stumble around hallways knocking into people." Paige Graham straightened herself. This took everything she had, not because she was physically hurt, though her wrist throbbed and her heart hadn't slowed, but because every professional instinct she possessed was screaming at her to hold herself together, to not cry, to not give this man the satisfaction of seeing her shaken. She picked up her tablet from the floor. She picked up her tray. She began gathering the scattered medication cups with a quiet, contained dignity that somehow made the entire scene more devastating to witness, not less. "You need to report to the administration," she said, and her voice was steady. "Remarkable. What you just did." "What I just did," Daniel said, and now the contempt gave way to something almost amused. Something lazy and comfortable, the look of a man settling into familiar territory. "Was an accident, and even if it wasn't," he leaned forward slightly, not threateningly, but informing, the way one explains a basic fact to a slow student. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Paige looked at him. "I know exactly who you are." "Then you know," Daniel said, straightening his jacket, "that my name is on this building. The wing you're standing 50 feet from? That's mine. This floor? Half of it exists because of my check. Dr. Adam takes my calls before he takes calls from his own board members." He glanced around at the gathered witnesses with a smile that somehow made everything worse, confident, unhurried, entirely unbothered. "So whatever complaint you're thinking of filing, whatever conversation you're thinking of having with whoever you think is going to care, I want you to think very carefully about how that ends." He picked an invisible piece of lint from his sleeve. For you, he added, as clarification. Then Daniel Peters turned, straightened his cuffs, and walked away down the corridor toward conference room B. He was smiling. He didn't look back once. Mark stood frozen for 3 full seconds before scrambling after his employer. As he passed Nurse Graham, who was still standing against the wall with her medication tray cradled in both arms, he stopped for just a moment. He started. Go, she said quietly. He went. Ruth, the senior nurse, was at Paige's side in an instant, hands on her shoulders. Are you okay? Paige, are you hurt? The baby. I'm fine, Paige said. Her voice was still steady. Still remarkably, heartbreakingly steady. The baby's fine. We're reporting this. Right now. I'll go to Dr. Adam myself. You heard him, Paige said. She looked down at the tray. Something in her expression was not defeat, it was something more complex, more carefully contained. You heard exactly what he said. Ruth's jaw tightened. I don't care what he said. You're our colleague. I know, Paige said softly. I know. She let Ruth take the tray from her hands. She leaned back against the wall for just a moment, one hand resting on the curve of her belly, and she closed her eyes. And then she reached into the pocket of her scrubs and took out her phone. She didn't call the administration. She didn't call HR. She pulled up a contact labeled simply, SCO, and she typed 4 words. Can you call me? There are 2 kinds of power in every city. The first kind is visible. It lives in glass towers and boardrooms, in donor walls and press releases, in the names of buildings and the handshakes of men who golf together on Sunday mornings. It is the power of money, of legitimacy, of systems designed by the powerful to protect the powerful. It is loud and well-dressed and it smiles for photographs. The second kind of power is invisible. It lives in unmarked buildings and back rooms and the kind of loyalty that can't be bought because it was earned through sacrifice, through presence, through years of protecting people that the first kind of power forgot existed. It moves through the city not in Bentleys but in knowledge, in networks, in the understanding that every street, every block, every corridor of influence has someone who reports to someone who reports to. James Schofield Graham. He had earned the nickname at 19, not because of the television character but because of his reputation for engineering exits, for finding a way out of situations that had no visible exits, for constructing solutions to problems that other men considered unsolvable. He was 32 now, the same slim-shouldered, watchful intensity he'd had at 19 now carrying the added weight of actual authority. He controlled the Hargrove district not metaphorically. Every business that operated in the eastern quarter of the city did so with his awareness. And, where necessary, his blessing. Not because he ruled through violence that was a simplification that comfortable people made when they wanted to dismiss what they didn't understand but because over 12 years, Schofield had built a network of mutual protection and mutual interest so dense and so interconnected that pulling at any one thread meant feeling the whole web move. Judges knew his name. Councilmen returned his calls. 3 of the city's most influential union leaders had grown up on the same streets as him. The chief of the Eastern Precinct had, on more than one occasion, found it useful to have Schofield's cooperation in ways that no official report would ever document. He was not, technically, a criminal. He operated in the spaces between legality and necessity, in the gray zone where cities actually functioned as opposed to how they appeared to function on paper. He provided. He protected. He resolved. And above everything else, above the territory and the influence and the carefully maintained network of obligations and loyalties above everything, he loved his sister. Paige Graham was the thing in Schofield's life that required no calculation, no strategy, no assessment of advantage. She was the reason he had worked to make the neighborhood safer, year by year, block by block, starting from the time she was 12 and he was 16 and he'd walked her home every single day because the streets weren't safe for her to walk alone. She was the reason he had funded, quietly and anonymously, the expansion of the community health clinic on Breslin Street. She was the reason that when she told him she wanted to be a nurse, a real nurse, SCO, at a real hospital, he had not laughed or questioned or redirected. He had said, "Then that's what you're going to be." She had never asked him for anything. That was what made the phone ring twice before he picked it up, look at her forward message, and call her back immediately, the absolute certainty, built through years of knowing her, that if Paige Graham was reaching out to him, something had happened that she could not handle through normal channels. She answered on the first ring. "Hey," she said. And something in that single word told him everything. He had known her voice for 28 years. He knew the specific texture of hey that meant I'm okay, and he knew the texture of the hey he was hearing now, which meant I'm holding myself together but only just. "Talk to me," he said. She told him. She was quiet and factual about it, the way she was quiet and factual about everything, the collision, the slap, the tray on the floor, his words, the witnesses, the smile. The smile as he walked away. Schofield sat very still throughout. He had a particular quality, people who knew him well had commented on it, of becoming more still the angrier he became. Lesser men got loud. Schofield got quiet. The stillness was not calm, it was the stillness of something gathering. When she finished, there was a pause. "You're sure you're okay?" he said. "The baby?" "We're fine, Sco. She paused. "I didn't know who else to call." "You called the right person," he said. "Go finish your shift. Go home. Rest. Sco. Paige." His voice was very gentle. "Go home and rest. I'll handle it." Another pause. Then, "Don't do anything. I'm going to have a conversation," he said. "That's all." He hung up. He sat for a moment in the leather chair of his office, a modest room in an unmarked building on the corner of Aldrin and Ninth, and he looked at the wall across from him where, pinned among various other things, there was a photograph. Paige at her nursing school graduation. Cap and gown. Smiling the way she smiled in photographs, full and genuine and like the world was a place worth showing up for. He took out a different phone, not his personal one. He made 3 calls. The first was to a man named Dorian, who knew everyone who was anyone in the city's financial circles and had, on Schofield's behalf, maintained a quiet file on Daniel Peters for 2 years, since Peters had tried to acquire a building on Breslin Street that served as transitional housing for families Schofield protected, and had instead encountered a wall of inexplicable bureaucratic resistance that killed the deal. "Peters," Schofield said when Dorian picked up. "He's at Hargrove right now. Meeting with Dr. Adam. What do you know about his current situation?" Dorian talked for 4 minutes. Schofield listened without interrupting. The second call was to a woman named Constance, who was an investigative journalist at the city's largest newspaper and who owed Schofield a favor that she had been waiting, for 2 years, for him to collect. "I'm collecting," Schofield said. "I'm going to send you something. It's going to be very well documented. I'd like it to move fast." The third call was to a man named Ray, who had, among his various responsibilities, a relationship with the head of the hospital's board of trustees. "I need 20 minutes with Chairman Burrell," Schofield said. "Tonight." He put the phone down. He stood up, put on his jacket, and walked out of his office into the pale October morning. Daniel Peters' meeting with Dr. Adam lasted 4 to 5 minutes and was, by Daniel's estimation, entirely satisfactory. The ceremonial opening would be covered by 4 major outlets. His name would be said 11 times during the ribbon cutting. There would be a full-page spread in the city's business magazine. Dr. Adam had been suitably deferential, suitably grateful, suitably aware of where his institution's funding came from. Daniel left the hospital feeling the particular pleasure of a man who had reaffirmed, in the space of a single morning, both his dominance and his generosity. He had slapped a nurse's tray away and then sat in a conference room and discussed his philanthropic legacy, and the cognitive distance between those 2 events was precisely 0. In Daniel Peters' internal architecture, they were not even the same category of experience. One was noise. One was substance. Mark drove him back to the office. He had lunch with 2 city councilmen. An afternoon call with his fund managers. A dinner reservation at Augusto's that he'd been looking forward to all week. The first sign that something was shifting came at 2:14 p.m. His phone rang. It was his lawyer, a man named Victor Hale, who had been his legal counsel for 9 years and whose calls Daniel usually let go to voicemail when he was busy. Something made him pick up. "Victor." "Daniel." Victor's voice had a quality to it that Daniel had never heard before, a careful, measuring quality, like a man deciding which words to use. "I just had an interesting call from Jerome Burrell." Daniel paused. Jerome Burrell was the chairman of Hargrove Medical Center's board of trustees. Their relationship was warm, comfortable, built on years of financial partnership. What did Jerome want? "He wanted to let me know," Victor said slowly, "that the board is convening an emergency session tomorrow morning." "For what?" He didn't say anything specifically. He said, and I'm quoting him, that there are significant new concerns about the hospital's donor relationships and the conduct expectations that come with major contributions. A pause. "He mentioned your name, Daniel." A cold finger touched the back of Daniel's neck. He ignored it. "That's absurd. I'll call Jerome myself. He's not taking your calls right now. That's the other thing I was going to tell you." The cold finger pressed a little harder. "What are you talking about?" I tried to reach him for you after he called me. His assistant said he's in meetings all afternoon and evening. Another pause. Daniel, is there anything I should know about? Anything that happened today? Daniel said nothing for 3 seconds. There was a minor incident at the hospital this morning. A nurse wasn't watching where she was going. Was she pregnant? The cold feeling spread from the back of his neck down his spine. Who told you that? It's not who told me, Victor said. It's who told everyone else. There's a video, Daniel. The word video hit him like cold water. There was a witness with a phone, Victor continued, his voice now entirely stripped of its usual reassurance. It's been up for 4 hours. It has 140,000 views. Daniel Peters stood in the middle of his office and felt, for the first time in a very long time, something shifting beneath his feet, some surface he had always assumed to be solid beginning, for the first time, to flex. Take it down, he said. I can't take it down, Daniel. I don't know who posted it. It's been shared too many times. Then find out who posted it and... Daniel. Victor's voice dropped. Listen to me carefully. I need you to understand that this is not a situation that responds to the tools you're used to using. This is moving faster than that. The video has been picked up by the Hargrove Courier and 2 local TV affiliates. And there's something else. What? Victor took a breath. The nurse. Paige Graham. Her brother is James Graham. Silence. Complete, crystalline silence. Daniel knew the name. He knew it the way everyone in certain circles of the city knew it, the way you know the name of the weather before going outside. You might not think about it every day, but when someone mentioned it in a particular context, your body responded before your mind did. Graham, Daniel said. James Graham. Schofield. The silence stretched for 3 full seconds. You're telling me, Daniel said, and his voice had changed, the casual authority still there on the surface, but something underneath it now, something with a small tremor in it that Daniel Peters had not felt since he was 7 years old and standing over a broken porcelain vase, that the nurse the pregnant nurse you slapped in a hospital corridor on camera, Victor said, with the precise cruelty of a lawyer delivering facts his client needed to hear, is Schofield's sister. Yes. The call came at 7:45 p.m. Daniel was at home by then, he had cancelled dinner, a thing he had never done, a thing that itself told him something about the state of his own nerves. He was sitting in the study of his penthouse apartment with a glass of scotch he hadn't drunk and his phone face up on the desk, watching the notifications accumulate with the helpless fascination of a man watching floodwater rise. The video has 400,000 views now. The comments were not kind. His name was trending locally. Jerome Burrell had released a statement saying that the board took all concerns regarding donor conduct with the utmost seriousness and that Hargrove Medical Center staff are its greatest asset. His 2 city councilmen had called to cancel lunch. His fund managers had emailed to request a call at his earliest convenience, in language that no one used when the news was good. And then his personal cell phone rang, the number that only a handful of people in the world had, and the name on the screen was not a name he recognized. He stared at it for 4 rings. He answered. Mr. Peters. The voice was calm. Quiet. The kind of quiet that had mass to it, like a room that has absorbed a great deal of sound. My name is James Graham. I believe you met my sister this morning. Daniel opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. Mr. Graham, he said. And the word came out differently than words usually came out of Daniel Peters' mouth. It came out carefully. I don't know how you got this number. I know a lot of things, Schofield said pleasantly. I know your private cell. I know your lawyer's private cell. I know that you have a $2.3 million property development application currently sitting with the city zoning board that has been pending approval for 7 months. A brief pause. I know the 3 board members who are going to vote on it. I know 2 of them personally. Daniel said nothing. I know, Schofield continued, about the 2019 incident in which you paid a settlement to a former employee that was structured specifically to avoid public record. I know the name of the judge who helped structure it. I know the judge owes me a favor he has been very eager to repay. The scotch sat untouched. The notifications kept coming. I'm not calling to threaten you, Schofield said, with a tone that made the distinction feel almost academic. Threats are for people who need to borrow power from the future. I'm calling to inform you because I think you've spent your entire life making decisions in the belief that there was no one in this city who could reach you where you stand. I want you to sit with the knowledge, this evening, that you were wrong. Daniel's throat was dry. What do you want? He said. Several things, Schofield said. A full, Public, written apology to my sister, not to the hospital, not to the press, not to your donor relationships. To Paige. Addressed to her, by name. Acknowledging exactly what happened and exactly what you said to her afterward. And if I do that, I'm not finished. The voice didn't change in volume or tone. It didn't need to. You will withdraw your naming rights to the oncology wing. The ceremony will proceed without your name attached to it. The donation was made, the wing was built, and that remains, but your name comes off the wall. Daniel felt something that was not quite anger and not quite fear, but some awful alchemical combination of the two. That's not a reasonable. I'm still not finished. A pause, brief and deliberate. You will make a separate, anonymous contribution to the community health clinic on Breslin Street. I'll send you the account details. It will be for the same amount you donated to the oncology wing. And you will never set foot in Hargrove Medical Center again unless you are there as a patient, in which case I trust that the nurses will treat you with more professional courtesy than you extended to one of theirs this morning. The line was quiet for a moment. You can decide, Schofield said, that this is all unreasonable. You can decide to push back, to lawyer up, to spend the next 6 months fighting on 5 different fronts while the video of you slapping my 7 months pregnant sister in a hospital hallway continues to circulate. You can do all of that. Another pause. But I think you're a man who calculates. I think that's actually what you do best. So I'll let you calculate. Daniel Peters said nothing for a long time. Outside his penthouse window, the city glittered, indifferent, vast, continuing its business with or without him. The apology, Daniel said finally. To your sister. To Paige, Schofield said. Another silence. I'll have it written tonight. I know you will, Schofield said. And he hung up. The apology ran in the Hargrove Courier the following morning. It was, by all accounts, thorough. It did not hide behind the word incident. It used the words inexcusable and unacceptable and I was wrong. It named Paige Graham with full respect. It did not mention Daniel Peters' contributions to the hospital or ask for any credit in the acknowledging of fault. His lawyer had written 3 drafts. Daniel had rewritten it himself, in the end, at midnight, alone at his desk with the untouched glass of scotch still beside him. He didn't know why he'd rewritten it himself. He didn't examine the impulse too closely. The Peters name came off the oncology wing wall the following week. The hospital issued a quiet notice about the change. It did not explain. No one publicly asked for an explanation, or rather, everyone who might have asked already understood. The contribution to the Breslin Street Clinic arrived anonymously on Friday. The clinic director, a woman named Dr. Amy Cole, stared at the transfer amount for a full minute before calling her board chair. She never knew where it came from. She never asked. She spent it on 2 new examination rooms and an expanded prenatal care program, which served, in the years that followed, hundreds of women in the Eastern District who would otherwise have had nowhere to go. Paige Graham read the apology at her kitchen table on a Thursday morning, 2 weeks before her due date, with a cup of decaf tea cooling beside her. She read it twice. Then she folded the paper, set it down, and placed both hands flat on the warm curve of her belly. She thought about a lot of things in that quiet moment, about the hallway, about the tray on the floor, about the way she had bent to pick up the scattered medication cups with people watching. About the smile on his face as he walked away. About her own voice, steady when she hadn't expected it to be. She thought about her brother, who had called her every day for the past 2 weeks to ask about the baby, about how she was sleeping, about whether she needed anything. She thought about power, the loud kind and the quiet kind, and how the loud kind always assumed it was the only kind. Her phone buzzed. A text from Schofield. Are you good? She smiled. Yeah, she typed back. I'm good. She put her phone down, picked up her tea, and looked out the window in the morning. The city went on. It always did. But something in it had quietly, permanently shifted, the way things shift when a man who has never known consequence finally meets something he cannot buy his way past, cannot charm his way through, cannot smile his way out of. Not punishment. Not revenge. Just reckoning. The oldest currency there is. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness is never wasted and that even a broken path can lead to beautiful places and change of lives, please like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Arena because your support keeps stories like this alive and spreading. Tell us in the comment what you would have done differently if you were the millionaire or the gang leader. Would you have used violence as the gang leader? Or has a stranger's kindness ever changed your life in ways you didn't expect? Would love to hear your story.